We had a water heater that we'd worked with a plumber and did a little experiment on, and had premature failure on it. It was only about 7 years old. And so we literally cut the thing in half and opened that thing up. And we did the math on it because there's actually a direct correlation of how much calcium carbonate can build up in a water heater based on the hardness level over per year. And it was like 50.4 pounds of rock that were inside the water heater before it even began to heat their domestic hot water. So they were basically heating a 50-pound rock for no reason whatsoever.
Welcome to the Waste No Day podcast, a podcast specifically for and about the home services industry as it relates to plumbing, heating, air conditioning, and electrical. More than a podcast, Waste No Day is a credo, a determination, a mindset. It is a never-ending discipline. It is a refuse to lose pursuit. It is a wake-up call every morning to waste no day. Now here's your hosts, Brian Burton and Nate Minnick.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Waste No Day podcast. Your host, Nate and Brian, hanging out with you on a new Monday morning, and we are looking forward to a new show. This time we're focusing on water conditioning and treatment, and we have none other than Joe, the BritaPRO man, joining us. Joe Kuklis from BritaPRO is going to be hanging out with us today for an in-person live interview, and man, are we excited to have somebody back in the studio with us, Brian.
Very excited, and I'm even more excited that you just made somebody a nickname, bro. I'm proud of you.
Yeah, it's what I do. No, not really.
It's Big Joe the BritaPRO.
Yeah.
All right, we got him a new nickname.
Yeah.
Let's not bring it up on the episode. Let's tell him about it later.
Great idea. Well, unless there's any confusion, he's not just a pro in what he does, but he's actually working with BritaPRO, which is an entire professional line of the Brita filtration systems. And we are excited to have them not only working out of our shop, which is a product that our guys here love, but just because they're a good name in the industry. And what they bring behind them is a huge recognition in the marketplace as to what water treatment can do for you and for your home. And so we're going to be jumping into that. But first, we're going to dive into the introduction of the idea ourselves. So we're looking to Brian for our quote.
It is life, I think, to watch the water. A man can learn so many things. Nicholas Sparks, The Notebook.
Oh, my heavens.
Dude, wait, hold on. Here's my issue with this whole, my concern with this whole notebook thing we just did there.
Go ahead.
Is when I said Nicholas Sparks, your eyes lit up. You were already depressed. How do you know that name?
I know who Nicholas Sparks is.
Who is Nicholas Sparks, the author?
First of all, I couldn't believe that he was a man. It took me a long time to like...
Nicholas?
I know the name. I'm just saying, like, I knew there was an author that wrote all these books and movies and stuff like that, and it took me a while to figure out that this was actually a guy doing this because they're chick flicks.
Wait. A dude wrote The Notebook?
Yeah.
Oh. All right.
Wait, are you kidding right now?
About what?
Nicholas Sparks is the guy who wrote The Notebook.
I thought it was like, what was his name who starred in the movie? Ryan
Reynolds. No,
that's Deadpool, buddy.
Yeah. I can't get his last name.
Crying out loud.
But no. Nicholas Sparks wrote The Notebook, and like, you know, this is what he does. He writes sappy chick flicks where somebody dies inevitably.
Oh. All right. I might be in. Now you're speaking
not
my
like
language.
war or somebody dies, like somebody gets, cancer or can't love the person they love or something like that. I don't know why I'm explaining this to you. This is feeling very vulnerable and revealing to me.
I like that.
Clearly,
you know all
I
this
know
stuff.
nothing about.
Yeah, keep going,
Nicholas
buddy.
Sparks.
Let's keep going down the road of sappy romantic chick flicks.
It's fine. I know all of you out there in podcast land. You're also doing that in your truck. Nicholas Sparks. I don't know. Notebook. Never heard of it. Never heard. Whatever. You've watched it sometime.
All the Sparkies are like, yeah, Nicholas Sparks. The plumber's like, who?
Exactly.
So this is one of my wife's favorite movies. I'll pretty much watch anything with her that has Rachel McAdams in it.
Oh, I see.
I'm not going to lie.
How's that working out for you?
What?
Watching it with your wife.
Fine. What's the problem? I don't sit there and talk about Rachel McAdams the whole time.
Does she talk about Ryan? What's his name?
Yeah, what is that dude's name? Philippi? No, that's not him. No, that's not him.
No, you're right. All right, I got to look it up now.
Yeah, what's that dude's name?
We paused this broadcast of our podcast to research some fact that has no relevance to the actual show today.
Man.
Ryan Gosling.
Gosling, yeah, that's it. Okay.
Ryan Gosling and Rachel McAdams.
Yeah.
They are desperately in love, but her parents don't approve. So when Noah goes off to serve in World War II, it seems to mark the end of their love.
He's not reading, ladies and gentlemen.
It's just internalized at this
Quoting
point.
the back of the DVD from memory. Sorry, the back cover of the book from memory.
Exactly. There it is.
Yeah,
Well, what does this have to do with water? Huh?
I don't know. I mean, I was like, I heard that quote.
We
and I
got
was
to
thinking,
up our quote game. Man.
why? No, I was thinking like it rings true. You can learn a lot by watching water. What we're going to dive into when we're talking about water here. And I was in a plumbing, maybe the plumbing mafia, just a plumbing Facebook group with like 40, 50,000, I don't know, maybe 30,000 plumbers and 10,000 homeowners trying to figure out how to change the flapper in their toilet. And somebody posted a pic. I don't remember what it was, but it was clearly on city water. It was a crap job, if you ask me. Pipes weren't level enough. Had solder drips everywhere, for crying out loud. But there was a sediment filter on the line. And a couple plumbers posted in there and said, what is a filter doing on city water? And I'm like, are you serious? You're a plumber. You don't think a filter needs to be on city water? Like of any kind of filter whatsoever? I don't know that he knew what kind of filter this was. I knew that it was a sediment filter because it was a clear plastic container and you could see the white paper filter in there. But he didn't say, what is a paper filter? What's a sediment filter doing? He just said, what's a filter doing on there? And there were like a bunch of people who liked the quote and agreed with him. I'm like, hopefully those were just, people who knew a plumber to get in.
These are the same people that jump in the pool and get a drink at the same time?
Yeah. Actually, he probably didn't know why there was a filter on that water. Definitely. Yeah, and just in general, I don't mean like sitting on a handcrafted rowboat with the lovely Miss McAdams and staring at a lake water, but I mean learning about water. You can learn a lot, and as a plumber, your knowledge of plumbing shouldn't end at the piping carrying the water or the tank or box heating the water. It should also include a very established knowledge of water and what's in it.
A water expert, if you will.
You should be a water expert.
The Water Boy.
And hopefully...
You should have used a quote from that movie.
From The Water Boy?
That would have been more relevant to our audience.
That's actually pretty true. Nah, there's a lot of married men in our audience. I know a lot of them feel my pain. This is one of those movies that Sweet Home Alabama, that's another one that I've had to watch thousands of times. Pride and Prejudice, Pretty Woman. Like, it's always the same 6 movies. Can't do it.
But I like your concept there, Brian. Becoming a water expert, becoming well-versed in something that isn't, it's ironic because everything that plumbers do is about water, but that's not studied at all.
No, and that doesn't mean that this quote-unquote plumber on this group knows nothing about water. There are people who exist in that group to stir up nonsense and get likes by causing controversy. It's the in there, it's the union versus non-union. It's always some union guy throwing up a meme about, quote unquote rat plumbers who aren't union and how useless they are. And it's like, he'll get 60 likes and then 180 people talking crap about him. They just exist for this, back and forth. So a lot of people will just throw a quote up there because they want to start drama. That's fine. It is what it is. But if you're really a plumber, if that's what you call yourself, and you don't know anything about what's coming into the home via the plumbing system, I'm not calling you a joke or anything, buddy, but come on. You got to do a little research, right?
I think so. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, electricians, they study electricity. Like, you have to know the concepts of electricity before you just throw in like wire nuts and switches and everything together. You have to know how electricity works. Mm-hmm. And HVAC technicians, they have to know how refrigerant cycle and airflow works. Like, it's part of what it is.
Well, I mean, yes. They don't know a ton about oxygen or what's floating in the air. And that's what we're talking about. Plumbers know which way water flows. PSI, stuff like that. But talking about really getting to know what that water is made up of. And when you're talking about city water, oftentimes, if not most times, you're talking about more crap in the water than you have in a well in terms of what is put in that water to kill things and in terms of what is left in the water when the things are killed but not removed. And we'll talk more about that with Big Joe or what?
Joe the BritaPRO.
Joe the BritaPRO. Oh, Big Joe the BritaPRO.
Yeah. So without further ado, we're going to put Joe Kuklis in your passenger seat. Our guest today is Joe Kuklis. He's the Director of Sales at BritaPRO and provides technical and sales training to the trade channel for installation and service. Joe has been associated with and passionate about water treatment and filtration since 2005. Joe's time in the plumbing industry stems back 20 years and includes actual fieldwork, installing plumbing fixtures and water softeners. After spending time in plumbing, wholesale, distribution, and with a manufacturer of rough plumbing products, Joe established extensive knowledge of water treatment and then an understanding of resins and injection molded plastics. In 2020, Joe decided to use his industry knowledge to partner with Lance Hunter to start Ironclad Partners, which was a sales and technical support business highly focused on water treatment. Joe has completed Train the Trainer courses for Lancaster Water Group, an 80-year-old fourth-generation manufacturing leader in water treatment. Through this education, Joe provides courses that range from full 2-day factory certifications all the way to 1-hour introductions to water treatment. Joe is versed in both residential and commercial water treatment. His favorite thing about water treatment is you don't have to sell it. You educate your consumer on how it works, why it works, what it does for them, when it works properly. When you present all that, it sells itself. And for that, we welcome Joe to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome, Joe. It's a pleasure to have you in studio.
Yeah. It's always nice to have somebody join us in the den.
Outside of current employees, how many people have we had in studio?
I can count on one hand, probably.
Yeah. Our buddy,
and for the plumbers out there, maybe even you can get to 3, maybe. 1, 2, 3. There you go.
Wow. You got to walk through a building full of plumbers to get out of here today.
It's okay.
Damien, our third-degree black belt jiu-jitsu buddy, was the first.
Gene Slade.
Yeah, Gene Slade, and Brittany and Maverick Slade.
That's right. Yep. And Mr. Matt Buckwater, of course.
Well, he works.
He would count. He would count as an employee. But yeah, it's
Eric
always,
Anderson, my main man,
right.
Eric Anderson, the crypto episode.
Yep. It's always nice to have somebody join us.
It's awesome to be here. Awesome to be here in person.
So, Joe, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself? How did you get into what you're doing now? What exactly is it that you're doing now, and what's kind of your story?
So I kind of broke into the trade business. Actually goes back to working at a bar. When I was in college, I was working at a bar and just paying the college bills, doing that type of thing, paying the rent and everything.
And you said this water tastes like crap. We got to get some water treatment in here.
Well, I didn't quite get into water treatment yet, but I actually ran into a trade distribution wholesaler, and we had broke into a good conversation, and he said, "Hey, you have a good head on your shoulders. I'm looking for somebody to come in that's kind of got a new, fresh look, and I don't care if you don't know the business. We'll teach you. I just need a good attitude in there." So had a couple meetings. One thing led to another. Started working on the trade side. I've always been kind of fascinated by that. Always been fascinated by innovative products, high efficiency stuff. Boilers, HVAC, whole market, and eventually broke me into the water treatment side of the business. And always just kind of been a passion to understand how to provide good opportunities for everybody and clean water.
Yeah. All right.
Who
now you're
doesn't like
talking
clean
about
water?
it.
That's right. That's right.
A lot of our clients, apparently, because some of our plumbers just refuse to tell them about it.
Okay. All right. And what exactly are you doing right now?
So I'm working with BritaPRO,
Okay.
who is a water treatment manufacturer and provider of point of entry, whole home water treatment systems and point of use water treatment systems.
Now, is BritaPRO different than Brita?
BritaPRO is absolutely different than Brita.
Okay.
There is certainly an association there. BritaPRO is the child company of Protect Plus companies out of Hickory, New York. Protect Plus Technologies has, over the years, been associated with Brita, with companies like Arm & Hammer. They are a family-owned science company, and they have developed product over the years and taken them to market on the retail side of the business. Most famously known for a product called Microban, which is an antimicrobial resin.
Okay.
That they've used to create and put into all different kinds of products, even air filters and many things in the plumbing and HVAC space.
Is that what my phone case is made of?
Very possible. Yes, yeah, very possible. Lot of different items, even into something as simple as a plastic mailbox, just different things that could not hold bacteria at that point. So a few years ago, they were in the retail space of the under the counter type products that you would find at a big box store, and wanted to capitalize on obviously the technology that they have and open up a space into the professional side of the business that we're in. And that was the birth of BritaPRO.
Okay.
So BritaPRO is really everything after the pitcher.
Yeah, sure. Well, Brita has a great market share. I mean, see their commercials on TV, see their filters, always a nice looking lady with a pitcher of pure looking water being poured out, right? It's always good stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Strong market share. Brita, some independent studies done. Brita is the number one recognizable name when it comes to clean water.
Interesting. And now there's a Pro line version of it.
There is a Pro line. So it's, we'd like to say is BritaPRO is everything after that pitcher. That's going to give you that same high quality water that Brita's known and associated with for years, for the entire portion of your house.
So Joe, you're working for BritaPRO, and what exactly do you do? How do you function in that role?
High function is to acquire and set up new partners like yourselves, and then provide them the sales training support that they need in order to go out and provide that product to their customer base.
Yeah. Oh, cat's out of the bag, Brian. Everybody knows now that we're a BritaPRO dealer. So.
Yeah. Well, we don't really keep it a great secret since I post it on social media all the time.
No, we love BritaPRO. We're big fans, and we found a lot of success with our clients, specifically with that name recognition.
Yes.
Because the Pro, the PRO, is capitalized, but the Brita piece of it looks just like Brita does, and so there's a lot of like, that seems good, and then you see the Pro after, you're like, okay, even better, right?
Yeah, one of the ways I would present in a plumbing truck going back to 04 would be just to say, how do you treat the water in your home, or how much do you know about water treatment? What do you know about filtering the water? And when I would ask the what do you know part, I would get Brita. People would say the name Brita. It's got to be the number one most recognized brand in water treatment. Now they're talking point of use. Certainly they're talking about a thing that screws on the end of the faucet or a pitcher in their fridge. But it's such an easy segue into, all right, let's talk about that for the whole home.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Isn't that how that goes? Something like that.
I don't know. I'm taking a long gander to where you may have come up with that quote.
Well, Joe, it's good to have you with us, and we wanted to tap into some of your knowledge. We were fortunate enough to have you actually here today to do some training for our plumbers, and thought it'd be cool to link up with you and benefit the rest of our listeners with that same type of knowledge, if that's cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're, what are you, like an hour and a half from here?
Yeah, hour and a half, 2 hours.
Ugh, yeah. My bad, bro. Justin Taggart is here from Bimax with us, just kind of sitting across the room watching the podcast happen.
Making sure that Joe stays in line.
He's like drawing an illustration of what we're doing on his notepad. And I knew Justin was flying in for today. Figure he's up at a hotel like Bimax usually does. I thought the same thing for Joe, that Joe was flying in last night, got a hotel. Our training starts at 6 a.m., so, no problem there, right? They just got to leave the hotel at 5:40 and be fine. No, Joe probably had to leave the house at 3:30 this morning.
I actually left last night to get here in time.
Made him post up at a Starbucks.
Yeah, had to wake him up in his car in the parking lot. Hello, yo, let's go.
Luckily, Sheetz was open 24 hours. So
yes, the good old Sheetz. Like I said, we were fortunate enough to have you join us this morning for some training, and we want to kind of dig into that. So I thought we'd start at the basics, which we've done before, but always a good reminder. If I'm a plumber in a truck right now, or even in another trade, and I have very little concept as to what water treatment is, water conditioning, filtration, any of that stuff. I don't know the science. I don't know where I would even start. Like if you were training a brand new plumber who had all he knows is how to do the plumbing piece of things and has no knowledge on water treatment, where would you start?
I think the biggest thing for them to understand is have just a base knowledge of the contaminants. You don't have to be a scientist. You don't have to kind of break down molecular breakdowns of carbon and all these different types of things. I always like to say just having good application knowledge, right? What's the right fit for that? So there's plenty of companies out there that just kind of offer their water treatment products without necessarily knowing that that's the best fit for the consumer. So testing's a big start. And then understanding once you break into that testing's a very, very simple process for a technician. It kind of changes the dynamic a little bit to have them test in the home. Gets them a little bit away from being a technician and a little more about being, a little bit of a scientist in front of the consumer. Helps them build a little bit of credibility and actually engage with the consumer, possibly at the kitchen table or in the living room or whatever it may be where they're testing the water at. It helps them, instead of just coming in as a technician to fix that problem and move on from that problem, they're actually looking at a long-term solution that would provide, a long-term fix for that problem. So getting into that and then understanding the basic contaminants and what they do in the home. There's two different levels of contaminants. You have a primary contaminant and a secondary contaminant. The primary contaminants, that scary stuff that we all hear about in the news stories and all that. And, your leads in your water and your PFOAs and PFOSs and that kind of stuff that's heavily regulated by the EPA and usually comes from a different source, and then you have your secondary contaminants, which is really where the meat of the water treatment kind of comes in. I always like to call it the 80-20 rule. Everybody's always enamored by all the different systems and all the different facets of water treatment and all the different types of water treatment. But in reality, you see a lot of similarities within your marketplace, and you can kind of settle into 80% of the time. Those customers are going to need the same solution. And then the other 20% of the time, you run into the scenarios of the Flint, Michigans of the world or something of that nature where we have to go above and beyond and maybe create a custom solution for them. And that's where the testing comes in to kind of know and understand those different contaminants, what's going on in the household and how you can provide a solution for the consumer.
Yeah. Brian's actually from Michigan, which if they have bad water, might explain a couple things about him.
Such as?
The good looks, obviously. Obviously.
That's where you were going.
That's what it was.
That's definitely listed by the EPA as a problem with the contaminants.
Side effect. But Joe, you had mentioned testing. I mean, do the plumbers have to break out the white lab coats, the beaker set, and the eyedropper? Like, what does that look like?
So it doesn't have to go that far. You really have a couple different options. Those secondary contaminants are not as health concerning. It's a little more aesthetic. Certainly are contaminants that can wreak havoc on the household or the appliances. And that's a very simple test kit that, a mechanic with a little bit of experience we can teach them how to test that water in just, 5 to 10 minutes. And then it's just about getting comfortable with it. They do in a way kind of come off to their consumer as the guy with the lab coat. Cause you break out a little bit of dyes and colors and you're mixing them together and you're kind of comparing them to a wheel and different setups. But basically, if you can count and see colors, we can teach you how to test water.
Oh, Brian's out.
I don't see colors now.
Do you have a recommended test kit, Joe?
So we don't have a recommended brand specifically. We do have Hawk is a very popular kind of in-home technician. HACH is a brand out there. We work directly with BritaPRO on a company called Safe Home. Okay. Which is actually a send-out test. So a little bit more extensive testing. So if your consumer does have concern for just a little bit outside of those basic contaminants, all of the BritaPRO products are shipped with a test kit in there. And there's multiple different levels of that, but they can send that out on their own. Either the consumer or the contractor can do it on behalf of the consumer to be able to get a little more extensive testing into some additional contaminants.
Okay. Now, you mentioned there's two types of contaminants, so primary contaminants, and I don't want us to nerd out here. So using 2-syllable words or less, tell us what primary contaminants are.
Scary.
Okay.
Wow, killed it.
I like it.
All right, we wrap this thing up.
Yeah, call it good. All right, so what all counts as scary?
Well, it's the stories you hear. It's the lead in the water, right? It's PFOAs, and don't ask me what that acronym stands for. Right?
I was going to. Okay.
Polyphosphate, PFOAs, PFOSs,
like prefluorolactic acid or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
polyfluorocarbon. Just basically any kind of different makeup of organic compounds that can happen from different things that we have had between factories or between different situations. Close to home a little bit here.
Pesticides?
Yeah, pesticides, great example. Chlorines, chloramines, different things like that. If you all municipalities are required to not by the EPA. They're managed by the EPA, so they can't provide you with any bacteria, of course, to your water. So a lot of the municipalities are going to use some level of chlorine to clean the water up before they send it to you.
Sure.
Kind of a necessary evil, almost.
Right.
What about, I actually read an article not too long ago showing to some of the plumbers. The article was blaming the lower birth rate on prescription drugs being used, quote unquote, and then put back in the water supply.
Or even just tossed in the toilet. A lot of people like flush pills and stuff.
Yeah, they didn't talk about that one in the, in the article.
I got you. The recycled prescription drugs.
Recycled birth control, if you will.
Gotcha.
And then men drinking the water and it not really being filtered out enough, and voila, you have a lower
fertility rate.
Yeah,
fertility there we go.
I was going to say sperm count. So there you go, Nate. Give Nate a little work.
Is that one of the 4-letter words we weren't supposed to use? Yeah.
Yes, but Brian doesn't know sperm is 5 letters.
Yeah, I couldn't. I'm just thinking like, sperm. Don't say sperm. Don't say sperm.
Well, okay, so scary stuff. I mean that's it sounds far away. Okay, unless you live in Flint, Michigan, that sounds like their problem, not my problem. Sure. So, is it my problem?
Well, I think it's increasingly more and more becoming our problem, coming a little closer to home. Just simple things, EPA regulations change over time. They look at things today, and if it wasn't a big byproduct of different things going on in the industry at the moment, the maximum allowable limits of that chemical could be set at a certain standard, whether that's a parts per million or whatever reading you're going to look at. And just like any science or medical type stuff, it requires research, right? And over time, sometimes they find out that chemicals are more dangerous than they thought they were originally. Looking at, there's actually a minimum allowed limit of lead allowed in water, right? But lead's the big scary thing that everybody talks about all the time. But there's a minimum amount that's allowed to be in the water. A lot of times, if you print out a municipality report that's available to any consumer off their website, you'll see that they found limited amounts of lead in the water, and different contaminants like that. But studies change, science changes, research changes, and they find out that maybe some of these things are a little more harmful. Different case scenarios. There's a retired Navy base up in Willow Grove, Pennsylvania, not too far from here, probably about an hour and a half just outside of Philadelphia. And base was closed down and was hundreds of acres and no longer used as an airfield. And they started building homes in different areas in that. And now to come to find out that some of the flame retardant materials that they used on the runway actually had what they call PFOAs, which is a forever chemical and is now in danger. A lot of people in that area in that water that can be cleaned out. So.
Wow, that's a disturbing example. Has there been any other examples of like chemicals or contaminants that were acceptable, 20 years ago that we've determined that are no longer acceptable?
I think nitrates has been a big popular or maybe infamous contaminant that's kind of emerged up over the years that we've seen.
What would count as a nitrate?
It usually comes a lot of times from different farm runoffs and things that are being used on farms. So obviously we don't have many farms around here.
Could you go into that a little bit deeper?
Yeah. I'm on a well with farms around the house, so the cow droppings have to go somewhere.
Cow droppings, is that what that is?
That's one. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
It gets rained into the grass, down into the stream, could potentially end up in a well. Yeah. Which is why they say you can have your water tested for bacteria today, and then next year, but in those 364 days, it could have changed 150 times.
Yeah. Wells are they're the wild card by far. I mean, there's plenty of times you can drop a pump in the ground and get very clean water out of it, but you can have a neighbor 7 miles down the road build a new house and drill a well or add something to their farm, put a new pump in, whatever it is, and that happened to be the same aquifer that you were in. So now that it kind of opens up to some other things that maybe you weren't open up to before. So always on a well, we recommend, getting that treated at least once a year. Any other concerns, maybe even twice a year. And of course, bacteria are always an issue. So something you'd want to be prepared for.
Okay. So the basic testing is going to identify some of those primary contaminants, right? So we're gonna pick out whether there's nitrates or lead or some of those other concerning, you call them scary things in the water. What about the secondary contaminants? You said they're more aesthetic. Does that mean that we're talking about brown water versus clear water, or what do you mean by that?
Sure. Well, when you're talking things like iron, right? I mean, we all need a little iron in our diet, but we certainly don't want it in our water. The iron in our diet is not coming from, certainly not coming from the water that we're drinking. It's probably coming from the 4 or 5 steaks that you're having today.
Yeah, buddy. Hopefully. Your mouth to God's ears.
Okay, so iron, obviously that's going to tint the water more towards the reddish brownish. What other types of secondary contaminants would there be?
So you can run into tannins, which is really just a vegetation runoff that can get into the water, tint the water a little bit brown. Iron's going to usually be a little bit redder in color to the water, and then there's a kind of a big bad brother of iron, which is not necessarily as common in our area, but known as manganese. And that's going to give it a little bit darker brown color in the tinting as well, too. So
I remember that. That's a periodic element, if I recall. Right? Mg or Mn? I can't remember which one it was.
I think Mn off the top of my head.
Yeah, and then magnesium, Mg.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so secondary contaminants. And are those health-related at all, or is that strictly, I mean, some of it is a little bit, but mostly just like how the water interacts with your home and the people in your home?
Sure. So it's not a huge health concern to you at this point. Of course, we all don't want to ingest, large amounts of iron or anything of that nature, but, it really comes down to it's incredibly harmful to your house, to your appliances, to the piping system, all the plumbing in your house that can certainly wreak havoc on all of that.
Yeah. What about hardness and acidity? I know those are two things that we focus on here quite a bit. Which contaminant section would those fit into?
Sure. So the acidity and the iron that we previously mentioned, when you talk about a well system, again, you're drilling a hole and you're sticking a pump down in the ground and you're pumping water out of the ground. So whatever is to be of that water is what you're going to get into your home for sure. Quite commonly when you're on a well system, you have to deal a little bit more with acidity. So you'll have to treat that before you treat anything else, because you want to kind of raise that pH up, get it to an acceptable level, so you're not popping pinholes in your plumbing or creating havoc or anything of that nature on your systems. And then we'll go ahead and treat the other contaminants in there. You're not going to commonly see that when you walk into a municipality or city water situation, because of the same reason. The municipality is going to treat that if that is a problem where they're pulling the water from the source, because it's, of course, harmful to their systems as well as they're delivering that to the homes. Hardness, that's the game changer. I always say it's the number one item. It's the number one contaminant that we deal with across the board, because it's not regulated by the EPA, and most of the municipalities are not going to spend the time and or the money to treat that in large volume, delivering water to the home. So you can run into hardness whether you're on a city water application or whether you're on a well water application. So again, the most common contaminant that we'll see across the board when you talk about water treatment.
It's hardness.
It is hardness, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that makes a lot of sense, because what's the primary function of the municipal water provider? To make sure that the water is safe.
Clean. Yep.
Right? It doesn't necessarily mean that they care whether your faucet stops working 2 years from now because it's calcified.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, their delivery method is all large diameter pipes. So it really doesn't start to kind of pinch down until you start to get to those service level pipes at the individual houses.
Right.
Right. It makes a lot of sense to add chlorine or chloramine or something to the water to kill the bacteria or sterilize the bacteria and make it safe to drink, but it would be very expensive for any municipality to start going into things like removing hardness. and it's not something they're going to do. But before we start moving into that territory and out of the safety aspect, there is one aspect of the chlorine that a lot of people don't talk about, and I rarely hear from trainers on water treatment or plumbers when they present things like activated carbon filtration, and that is the byproducts of chlorine treated water, not from the chlorine, but the stuff that the chlorine kills and leaves in the water, or sterilizes and leaves in the water, or the chemical reactions that occur from chlorine and what's already in the water, the TTHMs. And I know, but I guess I'll let you talk about the trihalomethanes. What does activated carbon filtration or BritaPRO type filtration do for those byproducts?
Sure.
Dead organics, I guess, in most cases is what they are.
Sure. So carbon is by far the most effective and probably the oldest filtration media on Earth, and it goes back to actual BC times of being able to use carbon to kind of filter out water.
Do tell.
That's how Rome was built.
History lesson here. Go for it.
I think we have some data that supports like 430 BC or something like that.
No
so, yeah, it is literally the oldest filtration item on the Earth, and natural to the Earth in a lot of ways too. There are a couple different kinds of carbon that you can use. You have activated carbon, usually made from a coconut shell, which is a good clean source for that. You can also make carbon from coal or wood, obviously, as we all know it. Those carbons all kind of have their own properties, and then they work with a method called adsorption, AD, as opposed to absorption. And then what happens is the more complex that a organic chemical is, the more that carbon loves it and loves to take it out. So when you talk about the chlorines and chloramines, that's actually a very complex organic contaminant that is used. And so as that kind of slides along all of the carbon there, if you can just think of imagine a little piece of charcoal or something that you would see off of a charcoal grill, it's going to look similar to that, a little bit smaller, but those contaminants are going to kind of slide through that and get stuck in all the little grooves and cracks and holes and chips and everything in that carbon. And it's just going to kind of grab and absorb onto that carbon base.
So it's essentially a net.
Yes,
water's going through, and everything else is getting stuck.
Exactly.
Well, not everything,
exactly.
but certainly
kind of gets stuck as it slides
chemicals.
through. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So leading up to point of entry, POE systems, leading up to the water meter or your well tank, whichever you happen to be on, chlorine is great, especially from the municipality where it gets treated through the miles of 30-year-old piping that it's probably going through. You definitely want some type of disinfectant agent flowing through that piping with the water you're getting ready to brush your kids' teeth with, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But do you want it once it crosses the threshold into the home? That's the question. Do you want that chlorine in the water? And
answer, no.
No.
Yeah,
and if you don't care about it,
hard pass on that one.
If you don't care about that, go ahead and research TTHM in water. And TTHMs are these chemical byproducts that are actually removed by these carbon systems. And I don't have a BritaPRO badge on my shirt. I have a Benjamin Franklin Plumbing badge on my shirt today. But we're here to talk about whatever Joe wants to talk about. But whether you can get BritaPRO or not, whether you can get any brand or not, it's my opinion that every home on municipal or city water, every home with a water meter should have at least a carbon filtration system on it. Pull all this stuff out. I was living off of Lancaster City water. Can't remember what the name of that municipality is exactly, but whatever it is. And we got a boil water notice. And I've talked about this before, but how did we get said boil water notice, Nate?
The USPS.
We got it in the mail, which meant, yeah, well, I don't listen to the radio. And if I watch TV, it's Netflix. So they weren't getting a hold of me those two ways. How else are they going to get a hold of me? So I got a letter in the mail.
That's like that Michael Jr. joke. Hey, this is my 2-week notice. I'm quitting today. 2 weeks from now, you're going to notice I haven't been here in 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. So 2-3 days after they decided we needed to boil our water, I got a letter in the mail saying to boil your water. And what it was, and I think it happened twice while we lived in that municipality, both times was an elevated level of TTHMs.
Yeah.
It was an elevated level of dead organics or sterilized organics by the chlorine that are an actual carcinogen. So on the World Health Organization or CDC's websites, you can find these TTHMs, these trihalomethanes, as an actual cancer-causing agent, and in higher levels, that is.
Sure.
So they call what's normally in the water negligible. Do I necessarily believe that? Do I believe a lot of things the CDC says these days? I'm struggling. Not always, but sometimes I struggle a little bit. I don't get pulled off the air here.
Yeah, moving on. No comment.
But I was always of the mindset that, okay, great, they say this much is safe. How do they know that this much is in there today? Sure. Maybe there was this much in there when it left the treatment facility. How do they know after 14 miles of pipe or whatever it is to get to my house?
Well, it depends. I mean, if you think about it, if they're going to use a heavy dose of chlorine because they were concerned over bacteria, how close to you are you to the source in your house, right? Mm-hmm. Because chlorine dissipates over time. So obviously the house here, whatever, a few yards away from the treatment center, all the way up to the one 14 miles away, as you just said, might see a lot less of it. The house is close to it, might see a lot more of it. So those maximal allowable limits are at the point of testing. Could be incredibly high near you or dissipate out. So you just don't know.
Yeah. The chlorine can dissipate out as you get further away, but then the TTHMs and stuff can actually become greater and greater as they travel through all this old piping. And, God forbid there's a break, there's a leak, there's, some way for stuff to get into that piping, and you have no layer of protection between that piping and your home. It's all kinds of risks to take for something it's really not that expensive.
Sure. And you look at this and, the traditional BritaPRO pitcher was always about your drinking water, right? And that's what that is. It's a carbon filtration device inside the pitcher that the water goes through and, traps all the contaminants in there and then gives you that clean bottle of water at the bottom. You think about that, how about the rest of your house, right? What about when you take a shower? And, I know my wife, probably takes a 120-degree shower if it would go that high, on the setting on the water heater for sure. That water's coming out of there hot. But when you have chlorine in the water, that steam, that hotness of the water helps kind of bring that chlorine to the surface. So now what's left is actually the gas portion of it, because the actual wet portion of it kind of gets evaporated up in the hot water. So now you're kind of ingesting that extra stuff when you go to do things like take a shower or, run stuff through your washing machine, your dishwasher, all that.
So we were told on one episode that not only are you breathing it in vapor form, but you are also absorbing it through your skin.
Correct.
How much truth is there to that?
Yeah, there's I've seen that study as well too. Yeah.
Oh, that's terrifying. So
you asked for the two syllables, and I said scary.
It's so right though, because all right. So what Brian's talking about sounds scary. Carcinogens and what is it?
Carcinogens.
Yes.
So what Brian's talking about there with cancer
stuff.
Cancer stuff.
Yeah, it is called a carcinogen. It is called a cancer-causing agent on the World Health Organization. I looked all this stuff up. I just started, several years ago. I just started researching everything I'd heard about. We got our producer Justin Taggart over here showing us on the phone with the thumbs up. Found it. That all this stuff is real. So, in the most plain terms possible, you say to the homeowner, "What do you have? What do you have cleaning the water as it comes into the home?" They say, "Doesn't the city do that?" You say, "Yes, they do. They make it safe enough to drink." However, how do they do that?
Is that even an accurate statement, though? Safe enough to drink?
Well, as it's tested coming out of the facility, yes, per EPA standards, it is, or government standards, it is safe enough to drink. Per
EPA standards is the big key, right? Because we talked about it. There's a report out there called a CCR, which every municipality is required to give you. at least on a once-a-year basis. So
Great band.
Yeah. Excellent band.
I didn't know they got into the
they've been dabbling, things were a little slow after.
I didn't know they got in the water testing business, but I'm glad they fell on their feet.
Hopefully you have some background music for that, but
we'll figure something out. Give me a minute.
Just dub that over if you could.
So that report.
So there's
CCR report. Yeah. I'm trying to think of one of their songs real quick to pull it down.
Bad Moon Rising.
Bad Moon Rising. Thank you. I was trying to think of something on the river and I couldn't get it out. And
well, have you ever seen the rain? I mean, okay, enough.
But that CCR report is out there, and just like we talked about a little bit before, you print that out for your municipality, and sometimes I've seen them where they're 2 or 3 pages long with different contaminants in there. And, again, at the time now, a lot of those are deemed acceptable by minimum allowable limits in the water, but things change over time. There might be a random chemical that we're not studying right now, that's showing up.
Pipes were made out of lead at one point because it was deemed acceptable.
So was paint, right? I mean,
lead paint. Yep.
Yeah,
asbestos
paint.
Ceiling tiles, which we're probably under right now. Sorry, guys.
Probably not.
No, this building's not that old. But it's a give and a take at all times. It is a give and a take. There's an acceptable level of risk in treating municipal water, because how high do you want your property taxes to be to treat that water?
Sure.
It's not like some guy in the state capitol or whatever is deciding what check he's going to write out of his bank account to treat the water. This is coming out of our pockets.
I live in New Jersey, and I don't get anything higher than property taxes of what we have, and I still don't have good water.
Where is it going anyway?
Well, Joe, this is good stuff, and of course, this is all very educational, which I think is something that is probably missing in terms of the public. In your opinion, is the public more lacking information or more misinformed with wrong information in regards to water quality, the health of your water, treatment, et cetera?
Misinformed by far. I mean, it's one of those scenarios where you have a lot of companies out there that have kind of given the water treatment industry a bad name because they come out with the next, kind of bell and whistle type thing, and they're going out there and they're selling all the things that this doesn't do, or you hear the term a lot, salt-free softener, right?
Oh, that freaking 9-volt battery that you electrical tape up to your pipe, and all you're going to have soft water.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, right there, if you're not removing or discharging the water out of the system like we would on a traditional system, you're not taking the hardness out of the water, right? Where's that going? Even if you have some kind of entrapment device or anything of that nature, there is alternatives for that, and there is right applications. There's things we can do to descale and different stuff like that, and there's a right time and a right place for that, and that's what it comes down to with educating the customer. I mean, the biggest thing that I've always said is, we don't have to sell water treatment. Even when I'm training technicians or anything of that nature, or contractors working with them, what we do is we educate you on how it works, why it works, and then what it does for you when it works properly. And most of that information is transferable right into the kitchen table with your consumer. And when you lay a lot of that information out, they want it. They didn't understand that, you were back there to change out their water heater, twice in 10 years, and what was causing that and what the issue was, and vice versa, on a shower cartridge or whatever it may be that was failing. So it's really about the education to the consumer.
Oh, Joe, I'm going to put you on the spot here. So if you were sitting at my kitchen table and you were about to educate me, or say for the next 3 minutes, on why I should get a water treatment system in my home, go.
On the spot. All right. I like it. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is are you on city water or well water?
I am on municipal water.
All right. You're on municipal water. So I'm going to come into your house and I'm going to have that CCR, as we mentioned.
Would you look that up before you got into
the
house?
Absolutely. I mean, look, we're not into the big scare tactic sales pitches at all, and, we talked about a lot of scary stuff here today, obviously, but that's not the way we go to market. Again, it's about educating the consumer and having them understand, what their potential solutions are long-term there. So, but I'm certainly want to make you aware of those things, right? And let you make the decision on what you think that you might be concerned about that's currently in your water, and then provide you with multiple different options to be able to treat that. I mean, So specifically, we're going in there and we're trying to treat your water. I mean, I'm probably relating myself to a reason why I'm there already. Again, we mentioned about the water heaters. We mentioned about the the faucets that you might be in there to change. Some of the training stuff we looked at today. On a gas style water heater, you can use as much as 30% extra BTUs. Every 5 grains of hardness in a water is going to lose you 4% gas efficiency. So if I'm selling you a 98% efficient, wall hung water heater, and you have 15 grains of hardness, by the time I walk out the door and you start using water in there, you lost 12% already in your efficiency. So I'm doing you an injustice by giving you that higher efficient product and not backing that up and protecting that with the softened water.
Sheesh. I'm just pulling up my CCR report here, buddy. So, all right. In my township, all right, detected sample results, nitrates, haloacetic acids, there's that word, Brian. Trihalomethananes, methanes?
Trihalomethanes.
TTHM. It just rolls off your tongue.
Just say TTHM.
Chlorine, copper, lead, turbidity, and those are all in chart form. So you would actually pull up a chart like this and like walk me through these results and kind of tell me what's good and what's bad.
Be able to direct you on how to look those up and understand what what might be of concern in your area.
Well, I'll be frank with you. I mean, I can't even say some of these words here. How much education do you have to do until you finally get me like to a place where I can talk with you coherently about even a solution?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, everybody loves Google, right? And everybody becomes a Google champion, a Google installer, or a Google whatever by just kind of Googling that and looking that up. And of course, if you Google any of those contaminants on there and kind of direct yourself back as a consumer, you're going to find some scary stuff. You can always find whatever you want when you're searching those things. But I like to say, look, you educate on what we have as an opportunity to provide for you, what that's going to take out of the water, what that's going to do for your system. And a lot of times, the consumer, you don't have to sell it at that point. You're helping them make an educated decision by educating them on whatever you're providing in that custom solution and what that's going to do for them.
Right. So it's really just putting yourself in the place of a consult.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, you're simply saying, hey, Joe, here's the situation. Here's what we're dealing with in your water. Here's the potential concerns with what's in your water. Here's some possible solutions. Do you think this is of concern to you? And do you think the solution would match that concern?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're asking those questions is big, right? What is of concern to you? It doesn't matter for your children, doesn't matter for this, those types of things. Again, we're not big on the scare tactics of trying to sell that into, hey, your kid's absorbing, this type of chemical or whatever it may be. But you certainly want to make them aware and have them understand, what is out there.
Now, you travel all across the country doing this, right?
Yep.
All right. So I have 2 questions for you. And you get in all the kinds of plumbing shops, and I'm sure.
Sure.
Do you do much with the homeowners at all?
I sometimes to support a plumbing shop or something of that nature that might need a little bit extra help on a position, but not frequently.
Okay. Yeah. So question number 1, what is the most concerning and or motivational piece of education in terms of water treatment that tips the needle for a homeowner? And question number 2, what is the most important piece that you feel is lacking in plumbers today in helping them get that homeowner swing over?
So question number 2, let's answer that first. Just asking the question, right? It's as simple as, hey, do you want me to test your water? Do you know what's going on with your water?
So is that simple?
It's that simple because it gets the conversation going, right? And hey, I did hear about this, or there was something on the news in this township, or is that of concern in our area, And even if you don't have all the answers, I mean, that's where we're here to support. I kind of go back to that, it's that 80-20 rule, right? 80% of the time, you kind of know what's going on with your report in your municipality. You know what the commonality is in that entire municipality, your service, your trade area, whatever it may be. Again, when you're talking well water, you got to treat each one individually, but a lot of similarities in those municipality sections. So you can kind of talk through that with the homeowner and be able to display that to them. So just simply asking that question and getting the conversation going a lot of time leads you to that. I always like to relate it back. We had this conversation kind of walking in the door here. It's very relatable to IAQ products on the HVAC side that you guys are certainly familiar with. And a lot of times just mentioning them and talking about them, people do want that stuff. without a doubt, as opposed to it, kind of being an upsell or a hard sell or anything of that nature. It just kind of sparks that conversation.
Now, do you think there's any finesse in how you go about doing that? Like, take it to the doctor's office, right? So if a doctor started performing a test on me without like explaining what he's about to do or what the test is going to show or any of those things, I'd be like, whoa, what are we doing here? What's with the rubber gloves, Like, how do you get past, like, is it as simple as just saying, may I test your water? Or is there, a more clever way of asking it, something like, hey, when's the last time you had your water tested? Or have you ever had your water tested? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, whatever a comfortable statement is, but hey, do you know what's in your water? Have you had your water tested recently?
I know what's in my wallet. Yeah. Not enough.
Yeah.
So
don't we all say that? Yeah, well, I'll sell a little more water treatment, right?
There you go. Okay, what about question number one then? What do you think is the most important thing across the country as you've been in different shops and you're hearing from all types of plumbers and water treatment guys and all that? What is the biggest deciding factor that finally gets that homeowner say, yeah, I think I'd like to solve this?
Yeah, so I think when they have a reoccurring problem, going on in the house and nobody's brought that to their attention yet, that, hey, this is why you've had these premature failures with appliances. This is why you have, premature failure with a water heater. Or this is why your faucets are scaling up. People don't blink an eye to spend, $1,000, $2,000 on a specialty matte black faucet nowadays or anything of that nature. And, simple level of hardness in water will take all of about 3 or 4 seconds to kind of scale that up. So if you're making that investment in a new water heater, new appliance, even new dishwasher, even things that we may not necessarily be involved in the plumbing scale, why not protect that appliance? Why not protect the rest of the household there?
It's a great question. I love the way that you phrase that. I mean, people will drop $100,000 on a kitchen renovation, right?
Sure.
And you get top end, touchless, motion censored, auto Wi-Fi, this, that, and whatever, faucets and whatever, $1,500 faucet, $2,000 faucet, and never once think about spending that same amount of money to actually protect that investment. Why is that?
I think, we've lived in this world of just go, and the whole COVID reset has opened that up a little bit. I mean, we've water treatment's always been a big category, obviously, and people have cared about it to a certain degree. But over the last 2 years, when a large majority of people spend a lot more time at home, I think you got a lot of those people that go, you know what? My water does taste like crap, right? Or we have seen some scaling or some buildup in there because they've just had that time to focus and reset and kind of see and notice those things instead of, running off to the next place or get the shopping done or whatever it is at that point in time. So just been a little bit of a reset there, and people have focused down a little bit more on that since the time of COVID.
Yeah, and that doesn't even take into account the unseen things, right? You can't see the damage done in your washer, your dishwasher, your water heater, and a number of other things. You can't see that damage until
your kidney,
all of a sudden
your liver,
your throat,
right, your stomach lining.
Until it's too late.
Absolutely.
Until it's already been damaged, it's already like not working. 6 years before it was supposed to cut out, or 2 days after the warranty stopped.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's always something like that.
We time that well as a manufacturer. We try to.
So I know in the training this morning you brought up an actual scenario of a water heater, and you guys had cut it apart. Talk to us about that.
Sure. Yeah. So actually, right here in your hometown, we had a water heater that we'd worked with a plumber and did a little experiment on, and had premature failure on it. It was only about 7 years old, and so we literally cut the thing in half and opened that thing up, and there was. We did the math on it because there's actually a direct correlation of how much calcium carbonate can build up in a water heater based on the hardness level over per year. And it was like 50.4 pounds of rock that were inside the water heater before it even began to heat their domestic hot water. So they were basically throwing, hitting a 50-pound rock for no reason whatsoever.
Well, that should have made it more efficient though, right? I mean, once you get rock hot, it stays hot.
It stays hot inside. The problem was it was building and you still had the outside of the tank. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my word. That's crazy. Pity the plumber that had to drag that thing out of the basement, right?
Well, every plumber listening to this right now knows that they've opened up the drain on the bottom of a water heater and had nothing come out,
right. Because it's clogged.
Because it's clogged. It's clogged with minerals. It's clogged with stuff. And that's a perfect sales opportunity for you. Don't just drain that thing down and then run back up from the basement and go get the homeowner and give them a price. bring them down to the basement. They all want to stand over top of your shoulder anyway. I've seen that plenty of times. So open that up and show them how nothing's coming out, or you're getting some grains or some pebbles out of there at that point in time.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm assuming that in that specific scenario there with the water heater, that was untreated water.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it was 17 grains of hardness and about 7 years old on the water heater, and it had made a 50-pound block of stone inside the water heater.
That's crazy. Do they have that same model for diamonds? I mean, I could get into that, right?
we might have something on our plate there, right? We'll go get all the hard water people and some new water heaters out there. And
so I think you also mentioned that there's a direct correlation between grains of hardness and efficiency. I think you briefed over that earlier. Go through that again.
Sure, absolutely. So when you're talking about your traditional gas style storage water heater tank, tankless water heaters, every 5 grains of hardness. So grains, when we say that, is the actual measurement. We call it grains per gallon. So that's the actual measurement of calcium and magnesium that would be in a gallon of water. So every 5 grains of hardness, right here in our backyard, we're on average about 17 grains, is going to create a 4% loss in gas efficiency.
Sheesh. That's crazy. So in the average around here, for example, 17, you're talking about roughly 12, 13, 14% loss.
Drop. So if you put a brand new 98% efficient, wall-hung tankless water heater in, and you walk out the door, as soon as they start using water, that thing's going to drop to 86, 85% efficient.
Man, that's just dollars.
Which is why a lot of tankless water heater manufacturers, what is it, over 10?
Every single manufacturer in their warranty fine print. I was in the trade when tankless first came out, and we had one of the pioneer brands, and everybody wanted them. And they sold. It was the first 90-some% efficient, PVC vented type thing, and everybody wanted them, and we sold the living crap out of them. And then second year, we took half of them back, right? And granted, they probably had some initial problems on the street and whatnot, but only to find out that most of those problems were from hard water deposits and those kind of real dense heat exchangers, and just caused a world of problems with those things. So now every single manufacturer out there actually has a correlation directly related to their warranty and what the grains of hardness either can be. I mean, some are very strict. Some actually say it has to be softened water, right? They don't even define it to say it has to be under X amount of grains. Each one kind of has their own verbiage on that.
To even count for warranty.
Yep.
Wow. I mean, right there, like that's reason enough to take this seriously.
Sure.
And even if you don't have a tankless, the illustration earlier where you're 50 pounds in a tank water heater is just, it just sounds bad.
And I mean, everybody's feeling it right now. I think while we were sitting here, gas prices just went up about 15 cents a gallon. So
I hope you filled up on the way here, man.
It's a lot cheaper by me, but obviously home fuel oil and natural gas, all those things are just spiking by the day. And so now when, we used to teach these things 5 years ago, and people kind of said, I don't spend a lot of money on my gas bill or my electric bill, but that's different right now. It's a lot different
now,
yeah.
Right.
Well, before we get too far off the hardness conversation, you did mention earlier that, and I'm going to be pretty blunt here, and hopefully we can talk our way back from this. You mentioned the quote unquote descalers and all the voodoo nonsense versions of salt-free softeners that did very little to absolutely nothing as far as I'm concerned. There is a newer one that's kind of picking up a head of steam now as we sit here, which is the polyphosphate filter. And we actually did have someone on before, a good friend of Nate and mine and a friend of the show, Curry Govreau, to talk about it. But you guys at BritaPRO also offer a polyphosphate filter as part of this 3-stage filtration system that we are actually installing here out of this branch. Would you mind going into what makes the polyphosphate different than, the one where you wrap a wire around your pipe and pray to a piece of PVC or whatever it is?
So again, obviously the traditional softening method is obviously a preferred method, but that's not always an option. Sometimes you don't have a drain option. Sometimes, the consumer just doesn't want the salt or whatever it may be, even though the salt doesn't actually hit their drinking water and all that. A better option sometimes in that scenario is the polyphosphate filter, which actually has that polyphosphate mineral inside of the filter, As the water goes through that filter with the hardness inside of there, that polyphosphate is going to coat the hardness and not allow it to stick to any pipes. So a lot of the things that we talked about, the extra benefits of using less soap, different things of that nature when you have softened water, you don't quite necessarily get all of those, but you're certainly going to use that to protect all of your appliances in the household and prevent that from scaling up with inside the appliances. Probably the biggest thing with those filters is they absolutely, you're going to use that mineral up over time. When we talk about a traditional water treatment system and a traditional softener, we're going to regenerate that system and reuse it type thing. With the polyphosphate mineral, that has a life expectancy, and we're going to use that up over time. So if they do not change that filter on a regular basis, because we all know how good our consumers are at making sure that they change their filters, and we're probably just as guilty with the shoemaker shoes over here in our
Right.
our own houses, because that's the last thing we would do when we talk about it all day and want to come home. But they need to make sure they change it out so that there's a fresh supply of minerals in there. On average, like, so for example, the one that you guys are working with here, that's rated for about 100,000 gallons on your average hardness, what you would see in the Lancaster area here.
Is there a maximum hardness that you would even recommend the polyphosphate at? Like, you'll get water here that's 30, 35 grain hard water. It happens from time to time. It's not common, but it does happen. And I always think, even with a polyphosphate type filter, some people just need to put a water softener in. Is that the case, or?
You're 100% correct. So at about 24 grains hardness is where that polyphosphate stops being effective at that point. So anything at 20 or 25 or above is where you're going to want to switch to a traditional softener, even if you didn't want that, because you could put the polyphosphate in all day on 25 grains hardness or 30 grains hardness, and it's not going to do anything for you. It just won't be able to keep up with that hardness in the water.
Yeah, I figured it's either that or you're changing the filter every 3 weeks.
Yeah,
So if it actually did enough, yeah, you'd have to change that not cheap filter way too often to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we are excited to have that new triple stage filter around the shop, and we've already put some in some homes. So why don't you clue us in on that one? That's a brand new product launched by Brita.
Yeah, absolutely. I was direct with you guys, and kind of came back from a lot of plumber feedback and different things that they ran into in the field. And, not every portion of the country has 17 grains hardness everywhere they go. Sometimes it's I was just up with a franchise up in North Jersey or Central Jersey, and they were consistently in the 4 to 5 range. We only start treating at 4, or start recommending treatment at 4 grains per gallon. So the large scale of their territory was at 4 to 5 grains hardness. So that's the perfect application for them. And we talk about this 3-stage filter. It gives you a great opportunity with 3 sets of filters. First one's going to be a sediment filter. That's going to take your general just sediment out of the water. It's going to start at about 25 microns, which is the rating of how much it can actually take out of the water. The lower the micron, the more we're going to take out of the water. And that filter actually works from outside in. So as the water passes from the outside of the filter down through the center, it works its way from 25 down to 5 microns. Kind of passes through there, goes into the next set, which is the polyphosphate filter that we just spoke about here, and then works its way into the final stage, which is a carbon block filter, which is going to take all those chlorines and chloramines and the quote unquote scary stuff out of the water that we just talked about here. So it's a great application. Kind of comes set up with some gauges for you, so you can kind of check the pressures on the filter and stuff like that, and know and understand if they're kind of getting close to a point where they need to be changed, as opposed to individually tracking every gallon that they use on their water bill type thing. So it kind of gives you the extra little functionality of that. Nice clean install. It comes, you have the opportunity to throw it on a stand if you want to do that and keep it kind of mounted to the ground, or it comes with a wall mount bracket already pre-formed for you, 16-inch on center, so you can just throw it on a couple studs, hang it, pipe it in, walk away, be done, and come back and change the filters in a year.
Yeah, no drain, no power, right?
Correct. No drain, no power.
Yeah, that's really exciting for a lot of specific applications we do run into, whereas you mentioned earlier, drain isn't available, or even the quick access to electricity. So that's a big deal.
Yep.
Huge deal when you have it under a set of steps in a bi-level home or in a mobile home closet, where you have no place to put typical water treatment that requires backwashing drain and a power source. You can't plug it in anywhere. I put this type of system in countless places like that, but
Right.
mobile homes in particular, man.
Sure, mobile homes. Yeah, anything without a basement. I mean, more often than not, it's hard to get to the plumbing there for sure when you don't have a basement.
Yeah, you got tons of plumbers who never bring up water treatment to someone in a mobile or modular home because there's nowhere to put it. It's just not feasible.
Sure.
And this is the type of system that gives people in a manufactured home the same availability, same access to really clean, upgraded water as everybody else has, and they should have access to this.
Absolutely.
Speaking of clean and upgraded water, I just got to ask, do you have a preference, water treatment, water conditioning?
No, I think it's probably a regional type thing where, you know, what's it, cola or pop or, you know,
Yeah, right.
it's all the same and all kinds of falls in. I mean, you know, I would say a little bit more of treatment is your to me, it falls under treatment's that traditional, point of entry type system. Right. And then filtration is, okay, we're using some kind of preformed block. Treatment, you have some kind of mineral media, and that's creating an ion exchange, or we have a bed of carbon and we're creating that absorption or anything over top of that. When I get into the filtration side of it, you know, I'm stereotypically thinking more of a cartridge style filter, something of that nature, maybe a point of use under the counter type setup.
Yeah. So, Joe, I got to ask, you know, do you have any of these products in your own home?
I do. As a matter of fact, yep.
Which one does the great Joe from BritaPRO have in his house?
Call again.
Yeah. I thought there was no 4-letter words allowed on this podcast. So don't be cursing in front of me again. So I went with our City Soft system. I am on municipality water, so that's the one that has it's got a plate that separates it in the middle. So it kind of keeps we have a carbon system on the top, a bed of carbon, and then I have traditional softener media on the bottom, and it keeps those two separate. Really nice functionality of that is that because they never mix, the water comes from the top down. It goes through the carbon bed first, takes out all that scary stuff, right? The chlorine, the chloramines, the chemicals that are in there, and then goes through the softener media to soften the water out. One of the beauties of that is one of the things that do beat up softener media over time is chlorine, right? So we're taking the chlorine out first before it gets to that media, so it ultimately is going to outlast my mortgage and probably my hair.
Oh, those things, that chlorine does a number on those little rubber beads in the softeners, man. It tears those things to pieces. It's great because, you know, we get to a house with a 5-year-old cheap Lowe's water heater, and it's spilled resin beads all through the house, and it's a nice big job for us, and we get to replace the softener. But had they put a carbon system in before it, some kind of carbon filtration,
sure,
they wouldn't have that problem.
Sure. Yeah, and that's one of the easiest things to do for, you know, you mentioned the big boxes and stuff like that. You know, you can go buy a competitive water treatment system there, but, you know, they're not doing that on accident. You know, they're cutting corners where they can, of course. And one of the easiest things to do is to buy a low-grade media that might be imported or whatever it is and doesn't have the same regulations. I mean, that's one of the nice things about BritaPRO is knowing and understanding that every product in there is domestically made in the U.S. You know, we have specific spec on our softener resins and our carbons and all of our medias that we use with specific mineral companies that we contract with in the U.S. here.
Oh, well, that's awesome. Always big fans of things made in the USA, and that's a great asset.
Absolutely.
Let's say we got Mike from Ann Arbor, Michigan, listening to the show right now.
I don't know about those Michigan guys.
There's a nod to Nate, who's a big Penn State fan. Mike's listening to the show right now, and Mike is not with the Tri-Brands. He's not with a Ben Franklin, but Mike loves the idea of this BritaPRO stuff and wants to start offering it in his market, which is not our market because we have exclusivity. Thank you. How does he go about getting in contact with BritaPRO or yourself?
Sure. So you can go directly to BritaPRO's website, just BritaPRO.com, and then you can, you know, fill out a form there, even like he was a consumer, and kind of contact that would go through our marketing director. He can contact any of us directly. I mean, we're as accessible as it gets. You can email me, you know, Joe Kuklis, JoeKuklis @BritaPRO.com.
Awesome. We were just doing a little bit of a survey here with our plumbers and have a question for you.
Fire.
Mr. Todd Helm, he wanted to know, has BritaPRO ever thought of making an app to diagnose or choose systems based on water samples?
Sure. Yeah. So great question. the technology in the heads today is set up to be able to be Wi-Fi compatible. That functionality is not on the board today. I think we've discussed it internally, and there's been this incredible craze to just make everything Wi-Fi, right? Like all of a sudden you can look on your phone and say, "Hey, my toilet just flushed," or whatever, whatever type is. So,
Gross.
Yeah. Just things so simple, and everybody just kind of came out with that Wi-Fi craze, and then you kind of got it, and you're like, all right, what do I do with it now, right? I just know that it's on, or I know that's it. Again, furnace, HVAC, things make a lot more sense there. So we're studying this a little further in. We have a lot of technologies in our softener control head that other people don't have out there. Some proprietary technologies and programming, things like that we can use to kind of come out to some more directly correlatable items that would be more functional on an app, like seeing and knowing how much salt I'm using at this point in time, and how much water I've gone through in the last couple of days, and use it as a water meter and other things like that. So that's all in developmental phase, and we absolutely have plans to come out with that. Just not sure on an exact timeline for that yet.
What about before you even get to the actual piece of machinery, like an app that could say, hey, I don't know, you plug the test in or something like that, and it actually reads the test for you and then makes suggestions, like based upon your current water readings, we recommend this, this, and this.
Sure. Yeah. So there's multiple, once you're signed up as a BritaPRO partner, there's multiple sales assist tools that you have available through your dealer portal that you can log into and plug into. Of course, you can use your fantastic and unbelievable salespeople that would be able to help you and support you.
Do you know
any? And I'm still looking for one. I'll let you know if I run it. But we're happy to help you. Obviously, kind of teach you and help you learn how to size systems. That's a fairly simple process. Also, there's a little bit more forgiveness in sizing a water softener than there is maybe like an air conditioner or something of that nature. So we can certainly help coach you and teach you on what's the provide some cheat sheets, things like that, so you can kind of quote them on the fly, because we all know, that's the best opportunity to sell it with your consumer while you're there that first time in the household with them.
Yeah. And do you think that most water treatment sales are made specifically because they invited you in for water treatment, or because you got invited in for something else?
I think a large majority are because you're invited in for something else.
Absolutely.
It's that 80-20 rule again, right? So 80% of the time when you're in there for something else, you can present that opportunity, and then maybe even less than 20% of the time, we have this scary stuff happen, right? I live near Flint, Michigan, and I want to know if I can potentially take lead out of my water or whatever it may be.
That's it, guys. I mean, if you are not asking the question about when's the last time they had their water treatment, or do they know what the quality of their water is, you're missing out. I don't care if you're there for a faucet. I don't care if you're there for a leaking pipe in the ceiling. I don't care if you're there for a backed up toilet. If you're missing out on that question, you're missing out on the opportunity to make that person's life better. Not just their life, not just the quality of their water, but the quality of their plumbing system, to hopefully prevent future problems, future breakdowns, to prevent future health issues, and just to make, general living, taste, feel, accessibility, and use of the water better for that person. And it starts with a simple question about, may I test your water?
Right, Nate. And that simple question is nothing more than, there are actually several ways to get to that point. My absolute favorite one was to say, before I get started on anything today, I'm a plumber by trade. Before I get started on anything today, before you show me the sink that's backed up, the toilet that's running, whatever it is, would you mind walking me to your main shutoff? And what would they say? 99% of the time, sure, follow me. Now they would take me to, under the sink or something. 40% of people had no idea where their main shutoff was. But maybe 20% of people would say, why? And I would say, well, I'm going to be working on your water system. If anything goes wrong, I just want to know where to run quickly to it and shut it off, number one. Number two, I want to make sure you know how to shut it off. Before I leave here today, if you ever have a plumbing emergency, I want to make sure you know how to shut the water off quickly. And I want to make sure that shut off is available and in good working order. When you get to the main shutoff valve, you have now found out whether or not they have any kind of water treatment whatsoever. And you can simply start by saying, I don't see anything here. If you don't mind me asking, how do you treat the water that comes into your home?
So good.
Solid.
That's it. And they say, doesn't the city do that? Or they say, oh, we have well water. And this is the one I love too. Been drinking it for 40 years. It's been fine.
And like
I drank
said,
from a hose when I was a kid. No problem.
Yeah, I made it this far.
like I said, I've been drinking it for 40 years and I'm fine.
And I usually say, you could have been 2 inches taller.
Well, so the people that grew up on well water, right? They don't trust city water, and the people that grew up on city water don't trust well water.
So true.
Yep.
So who's right?
Neither. They both
Neither,
need water
yeah.
treatment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll just say, I'll talk about what I know about the water coming into the home at this point. I've lived most of my life on city water. I now, for the last, 4 years in the neighborhood I'm in now, we're on a well, and I'm pretty familiar with both now, and I have done days and days worth of research on both. And I know that in either case, you are safer, more protected, and have just generally longer lasting plumbing system with some kind of water conditioning system, regardless of where your water comes from. It's a better plan to have it than not have it. And it is an easy conversation when you use one of the things that we talked about today, or DYOR, baby. Just like they say in the crypto world, do your own research. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to Joe. My goodness, don't listen to Nate when we talk about water.
Seriously.
Go out. Just open the phone you're listening to this on when you pull over after you get out of your call so you're not late. And crack the phone open. Go to Safari or Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever you research on and look up TTHM. I bet you it pops right up. TTHM in drinking water. Look up the effects of chlorine in tap water. I know Massachusetts Department of Health, New York Department of Health, California has some. These articles pop up immediately on, at least on Safari on my iPhone, where they talk about the negative effects of chlorine in the tap water, and the fact that I think still around 80% of the nation is treated with chlorine and chloramines.
Sure.
So go Google that or whatever you do. Do your own research. See if it's something you think your client should have in their home. If you don't think so, as our buddy Gene would say, and you don't bring it up, are you doing something to them or are you doing something for them?
Right. That question still sits in my head. I think that's a great way to wrap things up here. Joe, it's been a privilege to have you on the show today. Thanks so much for stopping by.
I greatly appreciate the opportunity to come here today and meet you guys in person.
Yeah, it's great hanging with you and having you in studio, so to speak. By studio, I mean a warehouse-ish basement with stuff all over the place.
Yeah, awesome. So, Joe, if people, I know you gave your email earlier. Are you on social media, or are there any other ways of contacting you?
Yeah, sure. BritaPRO has sites out there. I have my own individual stuff, but BritaPRO is out there, and it's just at BritaPRO.
Awesome.
Yeah, so they can certainly connect with us there, and but probably the easiest way is contact us through the site or directly on there, and then we can talk about what's customized and what's best for you individually.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Joe. It's been great to hear from you and all the information that you brought to the table. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Hey, we hope you enjoyed this episode with Joe, and it was awesome to hear from him and have somebody in the studio. We always appreciate that, and of course, it's fun hanging out with him. And he gave a great training for us, and I'm sure if you're interested in getting some training from him and talking more about BritaPRO, he'd love to talk to you about that. But regardless, we found a lot of good information from him today about water conditioning and treatment for the home, and the value and benefits it brings to the homeowner, and also a challenge for all of you plumbers out there to become more well-informed and educated about just what's in your water. That way you can have a conversation with the homeowner and ask them the same question. And so I think it was a great podcast, and I think there's a lot more to even dive into on that in other research. But for right now, we'll leave it here, and we hope you enjoyed it. And that leaves us with our challenge then. So we want to encourage you to do your own research, not only on water treatment, but whatever it is that you specialize in and what could be better for you in terms of presenting things to your homeowner, solutions, making their lives better and more improved, and also to improve yourself, constantly looking for a better version of you. And remember, we ask you to choose to wake up every single morning and waste no day.